This week's Parsha, Parsha's Lech Lecha, introduces Avram Avinu very abruptly. The Torah doesn't tell us, as it did in last week's Parsha, that Avram was an Ish Tzaddik, a righteous man, a perfect man in his generations. Accordingly, God chose him. We just have God speaking to Avram out of the blue. We don't know why. Of course, the Medrash tells us a lot about Avram Avinu. And among the things it tells us is that at a very young age he came to recognize God. According to one version, when he was 3 years old. According to another version, he was already 40 years old. But at that point he began teaching, spreading the word. And the Torah ignores all of that. The Medrash tells us how he was involved in a great debate with Nimrod, who was the monarch of the idolaters, and Nimrod threw him into a fiery furnace. Avram was miraculously saved. Nothing is told to us about that. We just have Avram living in Haran, and God appears to him and says, "Go forth," and the rest is described in the Torah. And the question is, why is the background left out? Why did the Torah not consider this important for us to know? Well, let's assume that the Medrash is historically accurate. So why didn't the Torah itself tell us about Avram's youth, his greatness, his discovery of God? There's a very interesting Medrash. The Medrash says that what is Avram Avinu compared to? He's compared to a person who is passing by what the Hebrew calls a bira dolekes. A bira dolekes can be translated as a lit up palace. Now, what does lit up mean? So it can mean one of two things. It can mean illuminated, meaning there were lights in every window, or it can mean ablaze. The place was burning down. Not clear, even from the context, what it means. And Avram beholds this palace, and he says, "Efsher lebira below bal habira." There cannot be a palace without a master of the palace. There must be a master of the palace. Where is the master of the palace? So the Medrash says that at that point God appeared to him and said, "Anihu bal habira," I am the master of the palace, and accordingly, Lech Lecha, go forth. That's what the Medrash says. Some interpret the Medrash that the Medrash is telling us what the source of Avram Avinu's recognition of God was. Because how did Avram Avinu come to know God? How did he come to true belief? And the answer is from the argument from design. You know, there are various classical proofs for the existence of God. One of them is called the argument from design. Now, you look at certain things, they don't seem to be the product of design. They may just have fallen into place by themselves haphazardly. But certain things clearly were designed. If you look at this tissue box, you're not going to say that the elements just fell into place. Obviously it was manufactured, it was put together. It's very interesting. Sham Shafal Hirsch makes an observation that square items, rectangular items, are not found in nature. Anything which is rectangular is clearly man-made, and he points out that the various mitzvahs that are associated with rectangular things, or square things, such as the sanctuary, the mishkan, the mizbeach, which were all square, the talis, the tzitzis, are square for a reason, because it wants to be obvious that these are man-made items for various reasons. So it's obviously a product of design. Well, the universe as a whole is a product of design. Everything fits together too well. It works too well. One of the amazing observations that has been made is that, in a solar eclipse, the moon blocks out the light of the sun. And it's an amazing thing that, without thinking, you would say it must be that the moon is exactly the same size as the sun. Of course, we know that the moon is hundreds of times smaller than the sun, but it's closer. And therefore, when the smaller moon, which is closer, passes in front of the larger sun, which is more distant, it exactly covers the sphere of the sun. Now, what is the likelihood of that happening by chance? Because obviously it's a product of design. And that's the argument of design. As it was once expressed by a non-Jewish writer, if you found a watch, you wouldn't say that the parts came together by themselves. You would say, obviously, this was manufactured. So Avraham Avinu thought the same thing about the world. He passed by this palace. The palace was illuminated, it was brightly lit, and he said, there can't be a palace without a master of the palace. Someone must have built this palace. So who's the master? So the person revealed himself and said, I am the master of the palace. There's one very serious problem with that medrash, a historical problem. Because according to the medrash, other midrashim, Avraham came to his belief in God either at the age of 3, the age of 40. The divine revelation came to Avraham when he was 75 years old. That's what the Chumash says, that God appeared to Avraham in Haran when he was 75 years old. So we're talking about something that happened 35 years after he came to know the existence of God, even by the latest calculation. And the Medrash says that when Avraham Avinu had this realization about the palace, immediately God appeared to him and said, I'm the master of the palace. So we're not talking about something which happened when Avraham was 40. We're talking about something that happened when Avraham was 75. So obviously the discussion in the Medrash can't be how Avraham Avinu came to know God, because that was 35 years before. Obviously we're talking about something which happened immediately before God's revelation to Avraham. So what is the point of the Medrash? Now, I would conjecture that the Medrash is saying something else entirely. And I think we should go with the commentaries to understand that the Bira Dolekes does not mean an illuminated palace. It means a palace that was ablaze. It was a palace that was burning down. And the question Avraham asked was not the classic argument from design. He wasn't really pointing out that it's such a beautiful palace, it must have been built by somebody. He's saying something else. He's saying that not only must the palace have been designed, it must have been built for a reason. Anybody who's wise enough, who's clever enough to build a palace must have built it for a reason. Now there's a serious problem. Because if he built it for a reason, how can he stand idly by and watch it burn down? That can't be. That makes no sense. In other words, the fact that the palace must have had a builder, that's an insight that he had long before. But he's raising a different question. He's established in his thinking that not only must the palace have had a creator, it must have a creator who created it for a reason, who obviously cares, who wants it to exist. So, where is he? The place is burning down. Where is he? That's the world. See, Avraham Avinu was living in a time that the world appeared to have been going down the drain. According to Chazal, it seems that the generation of Avraham was not really any better than the generation of the Mabul, generation of the flood. Whereas the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos seems to equate the two generations. It says there were 10 generations from Adam until Noach, and this teaches us how patient God is, that he waited 10 generations until he brought the flood. And then the Mishnah continues, there were 10 generations from Noach until Avraham, and this teaches us how patient God was until Avraham came along and he saved the world. But the implication clearly is that there's an equation here. That the same decline that had occurred from Adam until Noach occurred again from Noach until Avraham, but then Avraham came upon the scene. But the world was in a process of decline, of spiritual degeneration. It was burning down. And Avraham doesn't understand that. He says, how is it possible? Why isn't God doing anything about it? Why isn't he doing anything about it? He's made a major investment in this world. He's not doing anything about it. And God says, I'm the master of the palace, and I am doing something about it. What am I doing about it? Lech Lecha. You go forth. I'm charging you with the mission to do something about this problem that the world is falling apart. And really what the Medrash is explaining is that why all of a sudden does God appear to Avram? When Avram is 75 years old. What happened just at that moment? Even if you want to say that God would not appear to Avram until Avram came to know God, that happened long before. So the Medrash says this is the mashal. There was something that Avram came to understand later. It took 35 years to work out the details. But he came to understand not just that the world had a creator, a designer, but it was for a purpose. And that purpose demands, requires that God be mashgiach, that he oversee, that he supervise, that he maintain the world. And this is impossible. This cannot be. At that point, God says, now that you understand it, now I can charge you with the mission. Meaning this. Let's say I want to give you a job. There's a big problem, and I give you the job to solve the problem. You're not going to do a great job until you understand the problem, until you realize there's a problem. If you think everything is fine, then you're not going to be able to bring about the change that we need, so to speak, to borrow a slogan. But until you understand the problem, let's say, for example, you're a teacher in a school, and the principal in the school, having a broader view, sees there's a problem, something has to be changed, something has to be corrected, but the staff members don't see it. Their focus is a little bit narrower, perhaps they haven't been there as long, they don't remember what it was like before. So the principal goes over to the teacher and says, you know, we really gotta fix things and change things, and these are perhaps some ideas you might consider doing. Well, the teacher doesn't think anything's going wrong, if he thinks everything is fine, so like, why make the adjustments? Just keep on doing things the old-fashioned way. It's only when the teacher himself understands, yes, there's a problem over here. Now the principal can guide and instruct the teacher as to how to deal with it. That's the story. As long as Avraham Avinu did not see the problem, there was no point in giving him the mission of Lech Lecha.